I'm Alex Kennedy, Executive Director Emerita here at the Carle. On behalf of Bill Gorth, the museum's board chair, and Jen Shantz, my very talented and hardworking successor, I'd like to welcome all of you to the 12th Annual BERL Lecture. If you're a fellow museum member, well, then let me take this moment to say thank you very much for supporting the museum. It's lovely to be back here on this stage today, especially because this gives me the opportunity to express my personal appreciation for two people who have been invested in the success of the Carle for many years. Barbara Elleman, the generous co-founder of the Barbara Elleman Research Library, and the brilliant artist and author Brian Pinkney, a longtime supporter of the museum, and lucky us, our special lecturer today. Barbara and Brian, we're so grateful to both of you for being here today with us and for everything you've done and do to help make the Carle a world-recognized center for the study of picture book art. Also with us today is Andrea Davis Pinkney, a Carle board member and curator of the acclaimed exhibition, Picture the Dream, the story of the civil rights movement through picture books, which opened at the High Museum of Art in Atlanta in 2020, came to the Carle in 2021, and closed at the New York Historical Society in 2022. Happily, it has just reopened in a new format at the Kansas Children's Discovery Center in Topeka. Andrea and Brian are wife and husband and frequent creative collaborators. Brian's late father, the legendary Jerry Pinkney, was a founding board member at the Carle and a BERL speaker too. Jerry and Brian's mother, Gloria Jean, were also a husband and wife team who regularly collaborated on books. This is one seriously artistic family. I'd also like to welcome today two former board chairs. I hope I'm not missing any more. Chris Milne, our longtime board chair, and Jane Dyer. Where is Jane? Jane is right over here, also a former board member. Bill and Jen have asked me to share a little background on the Barbara Elleman Research Library today, and after I'm done, my former colleague, Courtney Waring, Director of Education, will introduce Brian. The Barbara Elleman Research Library, or the BERL, was established by Barbara and her late husband, Don, in 2003. Eager to encourage further scholarship in the field, they worked closely with the museum's founding director, Nick Clark, gifting their personal collection of more than 1,000 books devoted to the study of children's illustrated literature. For more than 20 years now, the BERL has been an invaluable resource for students, teachers, librarians, and scholars, everyone who is passionate about picture books. Barbara is a former Carle trustee and an active committee member and volunteer. She has a distinguished career as a librarian and biographer and as editor of the American Library Association's Book List magazine. She was the founder and editor-in-chief of BookLinks, and in 1996 was named Distinguished Scholar of Children's Literature at Marquette University in Milwaukee. Barbara guest curated two exhibitions here, one on Virginia Lee Burton and the other on Tommy DePaola, both in 2009. And with Chief Curator Ellen Kiter, she co-organized the exhibition 80 Years of Caldecott Books, which featured her collection of rare first edition volumes. Barbara's biography, The Worlds of Tommy DePaola, The Art and Stories of the Legendary Artist and Author, was reissued by Simon & Schuster in 2021. Please join me in giving a hand and a big thank you to Barbara. Barbara, will you raise your hand? Thank you, Barbara. If anyone here today would like to visit the library following today's program, Betty Matthews, who manages the BERL and is an expert on the collection, will be happy to provide a tour. Here's Betty right down here in the front row. And now it's my pleasure to invite my dear friend Courtney Waring to the stage to introduce Brian. Courtney?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's always such a pleasure to have the BERL lecture here at the Carle and to celebrate Barbara and her wonderful work that she's done in building the book collection here at the Carle. And in addition to the BERL lecture that we have every year, we also have been doing a series of programs called Explore the BERL. So if you're interested in diving into our book collection a little bit more, I invite you to join us on Thursday, May 9th at 11:30, where Barbara and Betty just dive into different books in our collection. It really is a different experience each and every time you attend. There's something new to explore, so I please encourage you to join us. It is an honor to introduce Brian today. As a child, Brian Pinkney loved drawing pictures on every surface of paper he could find. He also loved watching his father, Jerry Pinkney, illustrate books for children. Brian couldn't wait to grow up and do the same thing. Today, Brian is the New York Times bestselling illustrator of nearly 70 books, including 2 Caldecott Honor books, The Faithful Friend by Robert D. Sansucci and Duke Ellington by Andrea Davis Pinkney, his wife and frequent collaborator. Brian has been awarded the Coretta Scott King Medal and the Coretta Scott King Honor Award for illustration on 3 occasions. He is a 5-time NAACP Image Award nominee and has been recognized among the 25 most influential people in our children's lives by Children's Health magazine. Not only is Brian a visual artist, he is also a writer who has authored several acclaimed picture books, including The Adventures of Sparrow Boy, which will be in our next special exhibition in just a month. We hope you can come see it. It is called Pictures at Play, Metafiction and Art. It will be in our central gallery. And Max Found 2 Sticks, hailed by the Horn Book as one of the classic children's books of all time. As a fine artist, Brian's paintings are exhibited vastly in museums and select gallery showings and are also part of many distinguished private collections. Please join me in welcoming Brian Pinkney.
Well, hello, everyone. It's good to be here. First of all, I'd like to thank Barbara Elleman for everything that you've done in the children's book industry. I do remember the article you wrote on my dad after The Lion and the Mouse won the Caldecott. Now, as you know, Jerry Pinkney is my father. Andrea likes to call him Daddy Lion. And that is so fitting for him, because I can't even identify with the whole idea of the Lion King now that he's passed away. There's a scene in the movie where he's in the stars, and he's shining down on Simba. And, I've been asked to complete a couple of my dad's books, and I was telling my son this, and he was like, I guess that makes you Simba. And I thought, okay, I can work with that. And it is a family affair, it's always been. And I'm going to talk about 3 things that really resonate with me. My title is The Rhythm of My Artwork. And I noticed that my art has traveled certain waves, certain rhythms and patterns, and they're always reverting themselves and changing course, but there's always a common thread, which was when I was a kid, I was always trying to figure stuff out. I remember having action figures, like these little plastic figures that were stiff, and I thought, but they don't move, like their limbs don't bend. So then I'd figure I could make them out of wire. And I used pipe cleaners and wire and make little action figures, because I wanted things to move. I wanted it to be action. Another point that's really important is this idea that I read from Winnicott, which is a facilitating environment. And its environment, Winnicott is a child psychologist, and he said that children need a facilitating environment. They need room to play, a space where the parent is kind of there, where they're safe, but they have room to explore. And when I was growing up, our house was a facilitating environment. My dad always had a studio on one of the floors of the house, and he would love for me to come home from school and talk about my day at school, or I would talk about my soccer game and talk about how badly we lost, because we actually lost every game. But while he was cheering me up, he would keep drawing, and I would watch him. And I would learn about drawing by watching him. And then I would go to my room, where I had my very own studio. Yes, my mother knew that I needed a facilitating environment away from my brother. So she converted a walk-in closet into a studio for me, where I had a little drawing table. I was allowed to go down in my dad's studio and take all the little pencils that were too small for him, but were perfect for me, all the scraps of paper that he couldn't use, there were different sizes, and that's where I would make my artwork. Now, this idea of always trying to figure stuff out, I was always trying to figure out, why does my brother act that way? Why does my sister react that way? I never asked myself why I was the way I was. That came later in life. But I like this idea that when I look back at the pattern of my work, the stories that I write all revolve around these things. The other really important part is something Carl Jung talked about, which is active imagination. And that was my life. I was so imaginative. I spent all my time being imaginative. In math class, I was imaginative. In English, I was imaginative. So I didn't always get my schoolwork done, but my teachers saw that one of the ways that I expressed myself was through drawing. So they would always give me extra credit projects to do. Like I remember doing posters of how a tadpole became a frog, and I labeled all the stages. I remember doing all the bones of the human body, and I labeled them all. And when I think about it now, those are my first illustrations because they had to communicate to the rest of the classroom. Another thing that I learned how to do is how to use models with my artwork, and I learned that firsthand. In my dad's studio, he was always using us as models. So if he was doing a book about a little boy from Africa, he would dress me up like I lived in Africa. He'd read me the story, I'd act out the adventure in the book. He would take pictures and do his drawings from that. If he was doing a book about a little boy from India, the same thing, he would dress me up, read me the story, I'd act out the adventure, and he would draw from that. So I use my wife for a lot of my books, and my children's, which you'll see also. So, I'm going to show you some images. The first one is one of my more recent books, and it's called On the Ball. Now, On the Ball is, let's see, this new style that I started. So, this idea of rhythm, movement. I love movement in my artwork. And I also, in this case, wanted it to be very expressive. I actually started with hundreds of drawings of this little boy having this adventure. First I thought it'd be a graphic novel, then I thought it'd be a wordless graphic novel, then I thought it'd be a wordless picture book, then a wordless chapter book, and it ended up being a picture book. The artwork for this book was originally the sketches for the book. And my art director, Kevin Lewis, at the time looked at them and he said, "You know these are the finishes, right?" He said, "What you accomplish with your simple line tells everything. You don't need any more layers than this." So that was like a revelation for me, that my natural impulse to draw, to make art, was enough. So I'm going to read the story to you, talk a little bit about it. Owen loved playing ball, but playing ball didn't always love Owen. Yeah, it's kind of loosely based on my life. And then one fateful day, yeah, that was my favorite spot on the bench. Owen took his eye off the ball, and when it escaped, because it's going through a hole in the fence, it was up to Owen to chase it down and to get it back. Now, this is something else that I like working with my stories. This idea of, it's called transcendent function, which Carl Jung talked about also. This idea that you can take two different things and put them together, and it produces a third thing. That's not always logical, but something that kind of happens in your mind, naturally. So, it floated. This is a stream the ball's floating in. Now, you'll notice in my books, I don't have a lot of words. Why? Because I don't like writing a lot of words. And also because I want readers to be visually literate, to be able to read the pictures. So, just by looking at his expression here, you can tell he doesn't look very happy. Here, an interesting thing is happening. His feet are turning into a fin, like a mermaid. Yeah, so this idea of kind of abstract expressions where the marks that I make are also a mark, and they also describe something at the same time. Across a racing stream, whoosh, whoosh. I love whooshes too. And it's a gesture that I make with a lot of my artworks, and I'll demonstrate it later. I like these swirly motions that are just kind of energy. And in this case, it's also the wave. So he climbs up where he has his feet again. Then Owen tracks it by turning into a tiger. Through tangled bushes. Pounce, bounce. The ball flies over a cliff. Owen turns into a bird. No words at all. So if you're reading the picture, what's going on there? Okay, he looks a lot happier. He's building confidence. And he flew all the way back onto the field and into the game. Yeah. And from that day on, floating from being a merboy, fierce from being a tiger, and flying free, Owen always kept his eye on the ball. Yeah. So just so you know, I did score 1 goal in 2 years. And that spinning back kick was one of my favorite things to do with my active imagination. And then his team kind of picks him up. Yeah. So, learning how to paint. We're going to go way back now. Back to 1975, when everything was groovy. My father always took us to art museums. We loved going to the city and look at these beautiful paintings by all these great artists. And after looking at about 3 paintings, I was ready to go home. Why? Because I had already been inspired enough. I was ready to make art. One thing I learned that a lot of great artists made self-portraits. So I needed to make self-portraits. So this is me. You can tell a lot about me. When I was 15, I loved Kung Fu movies, and I wanted to be part of the Jackson 5. But I used to go to high school dressed like that. I remember those bell-bottoms, and I also loved action and movement, and you can see my little karate chop there. I'm trying to figure out how to make that hand go very fast. How do I make those swirls in the bell-bottoms? Well, I learned that from my dad that taught me, if you want to make those wrinkles, what you do is first wet the paper with water, only where you want the water to go. Before it dries, you go over with light blue paint. Before that dries, you go over with darker blue paint. I remember saying, but Dad, that's going to make a mess. He said, no. He calls that a happy accident. Because then I would turn all those swirls into the wrinkles. So I went on to take all the art classes I could, watercolor, acrylic, scratchboard, woodcuts. And eventually went to an art college, eventually moved to New York City. This is my studio, my facilitating environment. Everything I need. Lots of books around me. Why? Because whenever I want to learn how to draw something, I do it like my dad did. I get a book from the library. So those are all my overdue library books. I have a sketchbook on my drawing table. Ever from college, I always sketched in a sketchbook. I filled up hundreds of sketchbooks. I don't have a chair because I don't like sitting down. I'm either standing up when I work, or I'm laying down taking a nap, working on my active imagination, which is still work. And I have a drum there because I love music. I learned about music from my dad. My dad always had music playing when he was working. So, also I learned from my dad sketching, how important. He always did little thumbnail sketches when he was working stuff out. So right, he's always trying to figure stuff out by drawing. So this is a boy climbing into a boat, which after I get a little boy to model for me, that's the tighter sketch. And there's the finished illustration, which is done in scratchboard. Now, how did I discover scratchboard? I was getting my master's degree at the School of Visual Arts, and I had an instructor that said, now's the time to play. Try everything. We were trying paper from different parts of the world. We worked on little pieces of scratchboard, and I fell in love with it. It was very percussive. It was like made a little sound, like drumming, and it was sculptural, like the little wired creatures I would make out of pipe cleaners. This is from Suki and the Mermaid. That's Andrea there, by the way. I needed my model for a mermaid. I wanted someone who was really beautiful. So I used Andrea. She had to lay across the dining room table so I could get that angle just right. And this is a book written by Andrea. So again, collaborating, this idea of collaborating with Andrea. In the beginning, it was different than it is now. We go through different patterns. We would pass things back and forth. She would write things, I would see them, I would come up with ideas. It's about dance, it's about movement. So we did a lot of research. Andrea interviewed all these people that danced with Alvin Ailey. I went to dance classes, and I would sit in the back and sketch the different dancers, trying to find someone who moved like Alvin Ailey, because he kind of moved like a cat. It looked like so much fun. I decided to take some dance classes too. So when I needed a model for Alvin Ailey, I modeled for Alvin Ailey. So even though that's Alvin Ailey's face, that was really my body. Okay, maybe a little artistic license, but Alvin Ailey really had that special way of holding himself very strong and proud, and what I got from that was an embodied feeling of being free and open. Everyone try that. Put your arms up like that. Okay, turn your head to the right. Lift your chin a little bit. Oh, you could all model for Alvin Ailey too. So this is a little brief, the scratch board. The one I use comes from England. It's called SD. It's a white board covered with a thin coating of black ink. With a very sharp tool, I scratch the drawing in. Now I want to add detail, so it's like sculpting. But I want there to be a reason every time I make a mark. So if I'm scratching the floor, which is hard and straight, I'm going to use hard and straight lines. If I'm scratching his skin, which is soft and delicate, I'm going to use soft and delicate lines. If I'm scratching his shirt, that's right in the middle of the page, I'm going to use flowing and dancing lines. And I get a picture that looks like this. I thought, okay, now I need to add color. How am I going to do this? And I remember doing engravings in school where we would have to put the ink onto the zinc plate and wipe it off with the palm of our hand. So I thought, I could do that. So I would take oil paint and rub it into the cracks in oil pastels, and then take liquid medium, which would dissolve it into the cracks, and I'd wipe it off with a rag. And then I get paint back on top of that, opaque, with oil paint or acrylics. And I got a picture that looks like that. And then I realized I developed my style. Because every artist has to have a style. So mine became scratch board style until I changed it to another style. So this is Max Found Two Sticks. This book is very important to me for a couple reasons. One is it's about a boy that plays the drums. I played the drums ever since I was in the 5th grade. I played in the school band, I played in a little orchestra, I played in a rock band in high school, which is really great because in the rock band, the drummers got to play really loud and fast. And I practiced all day long, and till my dad would bang on the door and say, could you be quiet, because you're giving me a headache. Because his studio was right below. But I thought I wanted to illustrate a book about a boy that plays the drums. And I had all these visual ideas. I wanted him to play on different objects and they would repeat. I knew it was about this boy that's sitting on his stoop, which is his facilitating environment, which is what I used to do when we lived in Boston. And what happens when he's there and kind of uses his transcendent function to kind of produce something. So I'm going to read the story to you, but before I do, we have to do a little demonstration. We have a drum here. So one thing I realized is I wasn't officially diagnosed, but I think I have ADHD. I can only focus on something for about 20 minutes, then I have to switch it up again. What's interesting about ADHD is it says attention deficit disorder. Okay, that makes sense in school, but in real life, being able to switch topics like this is so great. So, we have a real drum, and what I would do at home when I'm working in my studio, like I used to do it really late at night when Andre would be asleep or the kids would be asleep. Well, Chloe was 5, she'd be asleep. Donovan was about 2. He'd actually climb out of his crib and then run around the house, and I have to chase him and put him back in the crib. Definitely had ADHD. But then, I would go back to work, and after 20 minutes, I start feeling like I'm losing my mind. I'd play the drums. Now, luckily I wouldn't play the drums in the middle of the night. I'd play in the back of an office chair with duct tape on it. It makes a really good drum. But I played different beats than I played when I was in the marching band. One is called a paradiddle, and I play it like this. It's paradiddle, paradiddle. Right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. It's a really cool beat because I can change it up and play a double paradiddle, which would be right, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, right, left. Or a triple paradiddle, which would be right, left, right, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, left. Or I could play it backwards, which would be left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right. Or halfway from the middle, left, right, right, left, right, left, right. I'll put them all together and make a beat. Something like that. Yeah. Wow, that feels really good. Once I do that, I feel refreshed again. And I like this thing about this active imagination, changing, putting different things together to make a third thing. So, you guys have all been sitting there. So I thought you need to experience the joys of playing a paradiddle. So, everyone make sure your laps are clear. I want everyone to raise your right hand in the air. It's the one on this side, in case you forgot. Don't worry, I forget sometimes. And we're going to play it at the same time, but I want you to say the hand while you're using it. Ready? Right hand up. You can play it on your lap. Right hand up. I want you to say it. I think it'll help. Right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left. Very good. Give yourselves a round of applause. Okay, now, as you notice, it takes practice to get really good at this, so not right now when I'm reciting the story. Wait till you all get home until your people tell you you're giving them a headache. But this is Max Found Two Sticks by me. Okay, another piece about this story. Originally, I was scared to write it. Why? I had never written a book before. And in school, I wasn't very good at writing, technically. I mean, I know I had great ideas, but my spelling was like, eh. My grammar was like, eh. So that didn't make a writer. So I thought it'd be better if Andra just wrote it. So I was like, Andra, can you write a book about a boy that plays the drums? And she basically said no. She couldn't because it wasn't her story and that I should write it. And I said, me, but I've never written a book before. And she said, I believe you can do it. And you know something? When your wife believes in you, you gotta give it a try. So I bought a computer, started typing my story. It took me 2 years to write it. I printed it out, it was only half a page long. So I double-spaced it because the editor wanted it that way, and it was a page long. So this is Max Found Two Sticks. It was a day when Max didn't feel like talking to anyone. So he sat out on the front steps and watched the clouds gather in the sky. A strong breeze shook the tree in front of Max's house, and he noticed 2 heavy twigs fall to the ground. Max's grandfather was cleaning the front windows. Hey, Max, what are you doing with those sticks, he asked, but Max didn't answer. He just tapped on his thighs. Pat, 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 putter, 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 pat, tat, imitating the sound of pigeons startled into flight. When Max's mother came home after buying new hats for the twins, she asked, what are you doing with the grandpa's cleaning bucket? But Max didn't answer her either. He just tapped on the bucket. Tip, tap, tip, tippity-tip, tap, playing along with the light rain falling against the front windows. When the clouds moved on and the sun appeared, Cindy, Sean, and Jamal stopped by drinking sodas. Hey, Max, what are you doing with those hat boxes? Max replied by beating on the boxes, dum-diddy-dum, dum-diddy-dum, diddy-diddy-diddy-diddy-dum-dum, playing along with the beat of the tom-toms in a marching band. Son, what are you doing with those soda bottles? Max's father asked as he took the garbage out on his way to work. Max replied by tapping on the bottles. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, playing along with the music from the church bells around the corner. Soon the twins came out to show off their new hats. Hey, Max, what are you doing with those garbage cans? Max hammered out his reply, a cling clang to bang, a cling clang to bang bang, playing along with the thundering wheels under the train that his father worked on as a conductor. Suddenly Max heard thump-tiddy-thump, thump-tiddy-thump as a marching band passed by. Max watched and imitated what they had done. And with a slight nod and a wink, the last drummer saw Max. And with a slight nod and a wink, he tossed Max his spare set of sticks. Thanks, said Max, and he didn't miss a beat. The end. So I'm curious about this transcendent function thing, like how I'm telling a story. I think it's just about a boy that plays the drums, and it's like, that's my story. You know, this idea of like, how do I make art? How do I communicate through my art? So I thought, what's another story I can tell? Taekwondo. Yeah, I was a black belt in Taekwondo. It's actually a black belt going for my second degree black belt. And to get it, I had to spar with 5 other black belts who already had black belts. I had to break 3 boards with a jumping spinning kick. I was a little nervous, didn't know if I can do it. So I thought, I'm gonna make this book about a little girl who's a white belt going for a yellow belt. And she's a little nervous. She has to break a board with a flying side kick. Her father used to be a boxer. He tells her he used to do this little shuffle step whenever he felt butterflies, felt nervous, and he would show her that. And this is what I would do also. Like if I'm sparring with somebody who looks really big and mean, I do this little shuffle step. So if they look really big and mean, I can back up really good. But JoJo didn't know what that had to do with her test. Then there's a boy in her class, his name is PJ. He's a green belt. He tells her she's never gonna be able to break the board. She says, why? He says, because you yell like a mouse. You have to yell, which comes from deep down in your gut. By the way, I love doing that. Sometimes I'm in New York City traffic, people won't get out of my way. I just roll down the window, and people move out of my way. So on top of her fear, there was a tree in her front yard that looks like a creepy tree bandit that tries to grab her whenever she goes in the house. So I remember when I was a kid, we had a tree in our backyard that was really creepy because at night, bats used to fly around it. And I used to have these dreams that the bats would fly down and bite me on the knuckles. still haven't figured out what that meant. But anyway, I like this idea of the tree symbolizing her fear. So she ducks in the house. Her mother tells her that when she plays tennis, she visualizes her technique. Again, active imagination. She says, JoJo, practice doing your flying psychic in your mind first. Let's all try that. Everybody close your eyes. Visualize yourself doing a flying psychic. Okay, open your eyes. Because normally when I do that, I take a nap. But anyway, when JoJo tried it, she saw these dark shadows moving around, and that night she was worried the tree bandit was going to climb in the window, but the next day she took all the advice everyone gave her. And when she felt the butterfly, she did a little shuffle step. When she jumped in the air, she visualized a creepy tree bandit standing in front of the boards. And as she kicked, she yelled. What did she yell? Oh, you guys got to work on that. And she broke the board. And when she landed, she got her yellow out. And that night, she wasn't so afraid of that tree in her front yard. She got into her favorite swing that was in that tree and kicked her feet up to the sky. Yeah. Oh, how'd that get in there? That's me showing off my flags. It looks like I'm really high, doesn't it? Yeah, I had a friend of mine take the picture. He was a photographer where the room and the floor don't really meet, so it's hard to tell how high I was, but I think I was about 20 feet in the air. So, Duke Ellington. So Andrea and I, we decided, let's do a book about Duke Ellington. Famous musician. We had gone to the Museum of the City of New York on Duke Ellington music, and it had Duke Ellington music everywhere. And when you went in there, you felt like you were surrounded by Duke Ellington music. Again, this facilitating environment. How do we create a book that re-experiences that feeling of listening to Duke Ellington music for children, right? I decided to use these swirly colors. Again, my swooshes. I've been doing them forever. Duke Ellington always thought of the different notes as different colors. So that was my way of visualizing it. Oh, there's Andrea, modeling for one of these. And there's our daughter, Chloe, when she was 6 months old. Isn't she cute? Yeah. Andrea's modeling for the ladies. Chloe wasn't supposed to be in the picture. She was supposed to sit quietly in her high chair, but she kept crying. So then we put her in a little bouncy seat. You know those little things you turn them on and they vibrate? She loves it. We put her in there, turned it on. She started screaming her head off. So when we picked her up, she stopped crying, so I thought, she wants to be a model in her daddy's book. So I had her there. There she is, sitting there listening to Duke Ellington. So this is Scott Monroe. He's the narrator of the next book we did. So Andrea decided that this book on Ella Fitzgerald should be narrated by a cat. And I thought, a cat? How's a cat going to tell a story? She's like, use your imagination. So I thought, I needed a model, someone who was really about this tall and liked to climb on furniture and run around. First I thought Chloe would be great for that, right? Because she had that cute little round head. But Chloe wasn't right for that because, I thought I should really be true to the character of the child. When Chloe was a baby, she actually never crawled. Yeah, she would just sit in the same spot. And she was like playing with a rattle and dropped it and couldn't reach it. She wouldn't crawl and get it. She would just point to it and go, Dada. And then I'd go get it for her, yeah. She's 27 now. Whenever she wants something, she just goes on my Amazon account. But anyway, but Dobbin, he was the one that used to run around the crib. He's a dancer. He's a natural-born dancer. Hyperactive little kid. Perfect. I used to just draw him all the time when he was running around. And he was the model for the cat. So this is Ella. She rolled out a tune sweet enough to bait, as Andrea describes it. She entered a dance contest and wasn't able to dance and decided to sing instead. So, active imagination, surrealism, how do they come together? This is Chick Webb's orchestra. He's a drummer. And he took Ella Fitzgerald under his wing because she was an orphan. So he's got wings. Get it? Like a chick, like a bird? By looking at my picture, I gave you a hint as to what kind of music Chick Webb's orchestra played. Swing, yeah, they're on swings, yeah. Do 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 do. It swings, right? And there's the cat swinging there too. This guy, eventually, Ella started going off on her own, and she started performing with this guy, a famous trumpet player. It's upside down, right? I did that on purpose, yeah. I give you a hint as to what his name is. What happens to you when you spin around? What do you get? Dizzy, yeah. So, but I'm always thinking back, it's like, how did I come up with these ideas? And I remember. It's not that I remember, but I know what I do now. Now I take a shower. And before the water starts getting cold, I tell myself, you got to come up with 3 ideas and get out before the chariot's cold. And I do that. And that's how I come up with ideas for my books now. I said I like to try to figure things out. There's still something I haven't quite figured out. And that is when I'm talking to voice to text, how come Siri writes down something different than what I say? The other thing I'm trying to figure out is why do I hit send before I reread it? So that's an ongoing thing I'm working on. We must meet hate with love. Those are the words of Dr. Martin Luther King that inspired these 4 college students in 1961 to go into a Woolworth lunch counter that was segregated. Now, this is a book also written by Andrea. How do we create a facilitating environment for children to understand what was going on at that time? They sat strong and proud, waiting and wanted. All they wanted was a cup of coffee and a donut with cream on the side. And I was thinking about these words, we must meet hate with love. What is love? What does that mean? I heard a speech by Martin Luther King where he talked about the different types of love. You know, he talked about the love for Coretta Scott King. He talked about love for your enemies. And he says, you can love your enemy, but still not want to be discriminated against by them. So I can love my enemy, but not want to be lynched by them. So that's why we need legislation. But I thought, okay, he got these from Gandhi's idea of this nonviolent protest where you just sit. And what it must have been like for those 4 students to know they were going to be taunted. People were going to pour hot coffee on their head, ketchup, but they wouldn't budge, they wouldn't move, they wouldn't refuse. So I thought of a couple ways in. One was the lunch counter becomes a character in the story. You see the white patients being served. Here the waitress is African American, but she has her back to them. They're behind her. She may know those kids. They may go to her church. But she can't serve them or she would lose her job. I thought the lunch counter is also a character in the story. And a lot of these ideas come from me just drawing and sketching, and then seeing what I sketch. The lunch counter must have felt like an earthquake coming in. And the students are sitting there through it all. And eventually, Andrea talks about how the lunch counter kind of is like a road in the future to equality. As different people come, different nationalities, old, young, white, black, different, and sit with the students. And eventually, the lunch counter, I thought, would be like a roller coaster, right? Because a roller coaster ride is exciting, thrilling, but also scary at the same time, where these students knew they were doing something to change history. Also, you can see the buses. I put a bus there too because the buses were segregated, libraries were segregated, and eventually in the end, you see the 4 students being, this is actually a fold out, and Martin Luther King on the television there. So, moving on, I like this idea of a facilitating environment. I like this idea of active imagination. I like this idea of this transcendent function. So, some of the books that I've worked on myself, Time for Kenny, about a little boy based on Dobbin. One of his facilitating environments was when he was 3 years old, he used to wake up at 3:30 every morning and call Dad. I don't know why he didn't call Mom. He called Dad, and I'd go in and play with him on the carpet with his little trucks and buses until he was ready to go back to bed. So this book is kind of based on him. Another thing is he loves trying on clothes and fashion. The guy is really into fashion, but at 3 he was that way. So there's a chapter in here where he tries on different clothing from different members of the family. Puppy truck. Our kids always wanted a puppy, but I didn't want a puppy. So I thought, what if this little boy gets a truck instead and puts a little kind of leash around it and follows it to the park? So this is Puppy Truck. Another way of using kind of like that active imagination. And then one of my more recent books is Hey Otter, Hey Beaver. So the facilitating environment in this is the river. It's an otter and a beaver that go into play. Well, the otter wants to play. The beaver wants to work. He wants to build a dam. So they're wrestling over these sticks that they find. And eventually, a little kind of adventure happens. But I realized this is also kind of about me, about 2 sides of my personality. First, I thought it was about me and Andrea. Because when we go to a pool, she jumps in and starts swimming laps, back and forth, back and forth. I jump into a pool and I'm like, I could do a backflip. I could do a somersault. I could roll. I could play. And so these 2 personalities come together. But there's different sides of me. There's a part of me that's so disciplined there's this type of self-discipline that I have where no matter, I should say, I don't think I've ever missed a deadline on a book. And I had an art director that told me, you did once. You were late for a month, the time your daughter was born. So there's this thing about me that's like, I get stuff done, but I'm always playing while I'm doing it, right? There's like a flow, a rhythm to it. So this book's about that. And then I have to share with you the most recent book, A Walk in the Woods. Now, this was a book that was originally started by my dad. He was going to do a book with Nicky Grimes about a little boy who looks in the mirror and he says he's angry. He sees his father staring back at him. It's a week after his father had passed. And I remember the editor called me and said, you know, my dad had just died. He says, you know, your dad had started a book. Do you think you could finish it? He says, do you know what it's about? I said, something about the woods and animals. He said, I think you should read it. It's basically our story. It's about a boy who goes on a walk in the woods that his father and him used to take. He finds a little map inside his coat. He opens it up, and it's a map that he follows that his dad had made. And it leads to a box in the woods. Along the way it's the facilitating environment. It's the woods. It's nature, which was both mine and my dad's facilitating environment. And he finds a box, and it are a bunch of drawings that the little boy sees and realizes his dad had done them when he was his age. The last page is left blank, and the note says, this is for you to finish our story. So, I was like, magical, mystical, a little creepy, but what a beautiful thing that I'm going to finish his work. Now, my dad and I had never collaborated on a piece of artwork before, and I thought, what is that going to be like? Like, I know the way he draws. I know his attention to detail. I know my attention to flow. How do they come together? Do I go over his line with mine? So I remember about a month before he had passed away, we had been in a country house in the Hamptons, and I was doing these swirly paintings, all right? We're going to pretend this is paint, with watercolor, just for the fun of it. I don't know why I was doing them. And I remember showing them to my dad. I had like tons of them, and he's like, what are they for? I said, I don't really know. Now, ended up, they became the underpaintings for his artwork. Now, because he had already done the drawing, it was a little difficult because I couldn't draw right on his drawings. I just couldn't do it. I tried. I didn't have that type of facility that he has. So I thought, how am I going to do this? And I remember thinking, I'm only supposed to do like 25% of the work on this book because he did most of everything. But I kept thinking, I'm going to go back and I'll try it. And I remember having a dream where I was a teenager with my dad, and we were all going out to dinner. And my dad looks at me, and I was working on artwork, and I was cutting something, and I had like 25% over here I was trying to figure out what to do. And he said to me, you can't come to dinner with us. This is in a dream. I said, why? He said, because you added 25% to that artwork. And I remember going in the dream, but Dad, you never punished us when I was kids, when we were kids. Well, you can't punish me now in a dream. And he said, no, you added 25%. So I woke up and I was like, 25%? Oh, I'm not supposed to add black line to his drawing. I'm supposed to use his line. So we brought in my niece, Charnel, who understands computer graphics and all that stuff that I don't understand at all. And she took his sketches and put them on top of my swooshes. So I had the energy there already, and a lot of them were done. I had to redo them because I was really kind of depressed. He had just died. I was feeling very gray, so I was using a lot of gray to kind of symbolize that. Then I thought, okay, when we combine his drawing on top of mine, this will be like the boy walking in the woods. It'll add like a really cool energy, like the energy of what that child is feeling, you know, as he's exploring. Now, what was also cool about this book, and we can look at the actual book itself, my dad was sketching in sketchbooks at the time. And when I was sketching in sketchbooks, he wasn't really sketching in sketchbooks. I realized, and my mother told me, she's like, you know he got that from you, right? I was like, oh, I thought all this time he was influencing me. I would come back and show him my sketchbooks, and then he started going out in the woods and drawing in sketchbooks. We actually used some of his original sketches in the book. So here's an example of, I don't know if you can see that, the picture that I was doing with the swirls around it and the boy. So, fascinating story. You gotta take a look at it. So I think I have one more image I want to share with you, and then we're going to have time for some questions from you all. Oh, our family picture. Yeah. So there's me, there's Andrea. This is years ago when Dobbin was about 5, I guess, and Chloe was about 7. Now, what's interesting about this picture, almost everyone in this picture has ADHD. Almost everyone in this picture is dyslexic. Some of them have dyscalculia also. I'll tell you that's not me. I love numbers. But what's fascinating about it is because they were being evaluated, we knew what we were dealing with, there was always this sense of play around it, you know, and acceptance, which is, you know, my dad didn't find out till he was an adult that he was dyslexic. I, as a kid, always knew the words were jumping around. I just didn't know they weren't supposed to do that when I read. What's fascinating now is our son is a professional dancer. He's 25 years old, and he's a background dancer for Little Nas X. Our daughter's 27. She's a therapist. She went to college, got her master's degree, and she's the one that's always using my Amex card. She has like really cool outfits that I guess I paid for. And then, you know, Andrea and me, we're just doing what we do. So thank you all very much. And I think we have time for questions, right?
We have time for questions. I can walk the microphone over to anyone. Oh. Yes.
Thanks. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
Have you ever done any work with animation, your works?
So I haven't done work personally with animation, but when Disney was doing an animated version of Iron John, John Henry, they wanted to do it in scratchboard style. So they came to my studio and I would do lots of samples, and they figured out how to do this animated short. So that's the closest that I come to it. Yeah, well, that would be the next thing. Who knows? Yeah.
I wonder which one of your books took the longest to illustrate?
Oh, good question. You know, interestingly enough, I would say it was On the Ball. Not because of what you see. Those images, I think I did them in one day. But I spent 3 years drawing that character over and over again and finding out what the story would be. So it actually took 3 or 4 years of just drawing that, you know, went behind that.
I like how you developed your own style with all the swirls and even in the arms the boy who was a drummer.
Max. Mm-hmm.
So it's so different than your father. But
Mm-hmm.
you were saying that you finally found your style when you did scratchboard. But how did you develop your own style that's so swirly and round and
You know,
very fluid?
I think, so I had a teacher tell me once that, and I didn't take it as a compliment at the time, but he says, you have a tendency to make order out of chaos. And he meant that all those swirls it was kind of like this wind, he said, that was around my energy. And I think it's the way I experienced the world. I experienced the auras of people. I know that sounds creepy, but, you know, energy around people. So that, I think, is what I'm drawing into. This idea of, you know, three-dimensionality. There's always energy that's moving around. And I think that is underneath everything. And then with the scratchboard, it was kind of natural working in reverse to be scratching away what's around everything to come up with what you're left with. And then when I started working with the brush, it just became quicker. Yeah.
When did you make that transition from scratchboard to and do you miss scratchboard?
Not at all. I loved looking at what I could do, and I was like, how did I have that much? How did I do that? I don't think my hand can even do that anymore. But it was just a natural progression. And again, I think it was just like my energy changed. So the way I wanted to make artwork changed. So it was, in the beginning, it was like different books that I was trying out. Like I think I did Jackie's Bat, which is the first one I did just in watercolor. And then I did a scratchboard in between that, and so the transition kind of happened within about 2 years. Yeah.
I wonder what other artists and illustrators working today can you get excited by?
have like a broad range of artists. I'm like still going back. I like Matisse, I like Chagall, you know, I like Picasso, I like the abstract expressionists. And then I like going to museums like contemporary art where I look at stuff which I don't know what I'm looking at. And just pondering, like, what is the artist's intention there? Yeah.
Can I ask a related question?
Yes.
What do you listen to music while you draw?
That's it's a very good question. So I will tell you this. When I was working in Scratchboard, I didn't listen to music. There's something about the fact that in creating artwork, I'm making music, so I can't be listening to somebody else's. But it was so time intensive that I would have to watch The Sopranos. Like that would be going on while I'm doing this, and that would energize me. Now, I listen to music, I dance, and I will listen to world music, I listen to hip hop, I listen to all different types of music, and then I turn it off, and when I go into the studio, I'm the musician. You know, it gets out of time. Where music takes place in time. When I'm working, it's out of time. So I can do a painting and think I was working on it for like 3 hours, and only 5 minutes went by. Because I was working like in just like a whirlwind in that moment, and then it's time to back off of it. Or I'm listening to music, I was like, do I stop drawing when the music ends? Do I have to paint to the beat? You know, so yeah.
When you did On the Ball, it was so loose, almost like Clinton's comics. It's a very similar, but you said you meant it as a sketch. Were you watching your son, or were you or just from your head?
From in my head, because I had drawn that character so many times, you know, the art director again said, he said, you know what, you know that character in your hand now. You don't need to keep going over it, you know, the layers. One of the comic book artist who did, what is his name? Dennis the Menace. Oh my God, I love that stuff. You know, again, with one simple line, he could get like a gesture, a hand, and you know, a wrinkle. And so I still have a book out of just a collection of his drawings that inspire me. Yeah.
Have you ever lost your passion for art?
Oh, that's a really good question. Have I ever lost my passion for art? Sometimes I start losing steam at the tail end of working on a book. It's not so much my passion for art, it's the passion for that particular project, because I'm already ready to do something different. And I think what keeps me passionate about art is there's so many different forms of art. You know, like even when Scratchboard was like, it's not that I got tired of Scratchboard, it's just that I remember picking up a Sumier paintbrush and painting this huge, actually I went to a workshop where it was called A Sword in the Brush, where we were walking around with a samurai sword, learning how to be a samurai warrior, and then we would learn how to do calligraphy with a brush. And I was just doing this for the fun of it. And then we made a huge brush out of a horse's tail, and we did a huge painting, one gesture. I had no idea how that would affect my artwork. But if you look at it on the ball, that's what it became. So yeah, it's just kind of like letting myself evolve and trusting that.
Susanna, did you have a question?
I have so many questions, Brian.
I'm sure you do.
The first one is, you and Andrea used to have a very specific routine in how the two of you collaborated. Like when you were permitted to give feedback, has that evolved over time? Secondly, the Pinkney dynasty has grown so much, and I didn't know that part about Turnell working on this book, so that was fabulous backstory. Thank you very much. I think some people might need actually a map of all the Pinkneys who've done children's books. And the third thing is, what are you working on now that we really get to dream about until it actually exists in our hands?
You know, I remember every question you just asked. So, first thing, Andrea and I, we do have a very specific way of working together, and it has evolved over time. One was that we cannot talk about artwork all the time. Like when we're brushing our teeth or something, it would just be too much. So we would always have a meeting on Saturday. We'd go to a little cafe, and I'd pull out my drawings, and Andrea would look at them. She'd pull out what she was working on, and we would look at it. Now, we had certain guidelines, like one I had that if Andrea was looking at my drawings, she couldn't say something like, Al Vanilli's foot looks like a football, because that really hurt my feeling. She has to say, Al Vanilli's foot looks unresolved. That way I could think of a lame excuse for why it looks like a football. And then her one comment was, whenever I read her manuscripts, no matter what I think, I had to always start out by saying, honey, you're off to a great start. So that's the framework. And that basically has stayed the same. That has not changed. I say what will change is that we're still evolving, you know, like with Duke Ellington, I remember reading her manuscript and being like, you know, wait, the drummer would start first, because there was a drummer. They laid down the foundation. Then the horns would come in. Then the rhythm section. Now what often happens is that our studios are in different places. Andrea will write something, and then she won't show it to me until she's done. She won't even talk about it with me until she's done. She needs to be in her bubble to work on it. And then when I get it, then I can say, honey, you're off to a great start, even though she's already been working on it. Now we're even going back and forth a little more again, like we used to do. So it's always kind of evolving. All the Pinkneys, so you know there's Jerry Pinkney, illustrator, married to Gloria Pinkney, who's also an author. They had a son, Brian Pinkney. That's me. I married Andrea Davis Pinkney, who's an author. We have a brother named Miles Pinkney, who's a photographer. He's done books with his wife, Sandra Pinkney, who wrote them. They had a daughter, Charnel Pinkney Barlow. She's an illustrator now, has done, I think, 8 or 9 books right now, critically acclaimed, doing beautiful things. She's the one that put together the book I was working on that I showed you, Walk in the Woods. What am I working on now? 2 things. I'm finishing up my dad's last book, which, if you know my dad, he was always setting a challenge for himself with his next book. In this case, it takes place in Africa. There were like 50 animals, little tiny ants, back views of animals. I put like an otter and a beaver in the book. That's it. I think I put a duck in it. So it's like, okay, how am I going to do this? He did the dummy book this big. He drew the ants life-size. I can't see it. So I blew it up this big. So I'm working on the finishes this big so I can see it, you know. And I'm going back in with my line, and I'm going back in with my paint on top of his drawings. So it's a real collaboration in a much different way. So that'll be coming out, I guess, next year. The other book is my own book that I just did, which is called Brandon and the Baby, which is about a little boy whose brother is born. And he has a blanket. He loves his blanket. He's not so sure about his baby brother. Loosely based on me when my brother was born. So with his active imagination, his blanket turns into different animals that kind of comfort him, and also the brother's a little curious about. And in the end, he comes to a place where he realizes he does love his baby brother. Yeah. So, did I get them all? Okay.
Thank you so much, Brian.
You're welcome.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.